When my son asked me if he could be involved in professional sport, I said yes, of course you can. And he said how? He said there's no one in sport who has any of the challenges that I do. My aim was to find these athletes, coaches, professionals, and interview them and share their stories so that we can show the world what is beyond perception.
Hello everybody and welcome to Beyond Perception Podcast, a podcast created to explore the world of sport and the people who are involved in it, from the athletes, coaches and the staff who are both on our screens and behind the scenes. And further to this, we want to delve deeper into the neurodiversity and physical disability of our guests and learn out what it takes to be where they are and inspire others out there. Hello, my name is Greg Mannion. I'm your co-host today and I'm joined again, as always, by my co-host Tatjana. Tatjana, how are we?
Good, thank you. It's been a nice start of the week. How are you?
I'm not so bad, thank you. I've had some coaching this week. I've done some stuff with my son's rugby team, time with the family. So yeah, it's been a good week so far. What about yourself? Anything interesting happening?
Just uni work and a lot of readings. My head hurts, but it's fine. Fell off my bike yesterday, so I'm still healing a bit, which is quite funny. But it is what it is. We just have to roll with it.
Excellent, what we like to hear. And looking forward to today's show.
I am. I'm really excited. We've got a very experienced, let's not give too many spoilers, but a very experienced guest coming. So can't wait to dwell and see what he's got in for us today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to our guest today. I've known him for a long time. We met each other when we were younger as teachers, and the development of both him in his career and then obviously my career slightly has gone in different directions. But really good bloke. I'm looking forward to speaking with. So you want to introduce our guest?
Yeah. But before I introduce the drill, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our channels. And of course, get comfortable, get your drinks, get your headphones or maybe even speakers. And let's start with this episode. We are very excited to introduce our guest speaker, Tony Fretwell. He currently is a talent inclusion officer at the ECB with his very rich, like I said, history in 3 different sports and industries. We will just uncover his journey and the role neurodiversity played in it as well.
Okay, so as you can see, we've been joined by Tony Fretwell. Tony, would you like to introduce yourself to our guests, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I originally am from Yorkshire, but I now live in the northwest, just outside Warrington. I am 47. I have 3 sons. I have a 19-year-old who's at university, and we have 7-year-old twins who cause mayhem in the house. 2 of those, so one of the twins and the eldest, are diagnosed as autistic. So that's created lots of learning opportunities over the years. I currently work at the England Wales Cricket Board for the ECB. I've been there 6 months. Prior to that, I had 7 years at the FA working in women's football. Prior to that, I had about 5 years at the RFL working in the performance unit of England Rugby League. Prior to that, I was a teacher for 12 years, and then prior to that, I was academy manager at 2 clubs. So that has made me about 113 years old.
Very humble, full of experiences.
Yeah.
And it's really great that you've come on. Like, me and Tony have known each other for a long time. I think we first met when we were teaching in Manchester.
Yeah.
And I suppose that was a long time ago. And I suppose we probably knew a little less about ourselves as what we do now, do we, Tony? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, there were lots of things, if we knew then, it would have been really helpful, I reckon.
Yeah, 100%. And do you want to talk to us a little bit about your journey then? So from being that teacher and your transition into sport, what's that journey been like for you?
I think the start of the journey goes right back to my own schooling. First love wasn't sport. Was in a family that liked sport but wasn't obsessed with it. My dad played grassroots football. He grew up in Blackpool. Hence the Blackpool references. He's given me that curse. I'm a Blackpool fan. My mum was from East Leeds, but her mum was from Castleford. So it's from my mum's side where I get that particular curse from. I've not seen a lot of wins with my teams over the years, but never mind. And so my first love was music and singing with a hairbrush in my room. And when I look back, I realised just how autistic some of my behaviours were, but I had nothing to compare because I was an only child. So I would create a set list that I'd recorded on a cassette of the Michael Jackson World Tour. This is about 88. The set list started with "Wanna Be Starting Something" and the order of the songs. And I would sing the songs in that order. And every time I did it, I would tick off where I was performing. So the tour started in Tokyo and I'd work my way around the world just doing it. And when you think now, that's a bit bizarre. But my dream was not to be Michael Jackson, though I did ask if I could have my hair permed because I thought that would make me not like him. But my dream was to be one of his backing singers. And when it came to sport and PE, wasn't really my thing because I was a little bit tubby. And when we were playing football, I was one of those kids that were picked last when the two captains, the best two players, will pick the team. To the point that I used my pocket money to buy some goalkeeper gloves, because if I held some goalkeeper gloves and willing to go in goal, I'd get picked earlier. Yeah. So it saved that shame. So I did that a lot. So I was probably in the bottom 10% of PE. And what changed was I had a PE teacher who was a brilliant man, Mr. Reed. And he was a season ticket holder at Leeds Rugby League, but he was also a member at Roundhay Rugby Union that became Leeds Tykes. But a cross-code fan and participant, which was ahead of its time for the era. And he said to me, and I'll never forget the words, he said, "You're not very good at most things in PE, but you're all right at rugby." He never said I was good at it. He said I was all right at it. And all right was enough to play for the school. So he said, "Will I go to after school club?" And that was enough for that to become my enthusiasm. A phrase I didn't know then, and I certainly wouldn't have used. But that's what got me into rugby. Somebody just saying I was all right at it in a PE lesson.
That's amazing.
And from there, I played for the school, played a full season for the school. We didn't win a game. I remember my first game was a Wednesday night, probably about October time. So we had just enough light to get the game in. It was dark at the end of the game. It was absolutely belting it down. It was ankle deep in mud, and not all of the team had boots. Some of the lads were playing in trainers. So I remember laughing as people were sliding around in the mud. And we got beat 52-0 by Armley. Not Armley Prison, just the school next to it. Some of them went in there. So it was 52-0 on the most horrendous night. And my mum came to watch. Dad was at work. And we walked home, and mum run me a bath, and I got in the bath. And I remember being in the bath, covered in stud marks, absolutely filthy, having been hammered in the worst possible weather and thinking this is the best thing I've ever done. That experience has lived with me right through everything I've done, because everybody starts like that. Whether you go on to just play recreational sport or whether you go on to be an international with 100 caps winning World Cups, everybody starts somewhere like that.
Yeah. It really interesting, Tony. Like, that memory for you just seems so vivid. Like, the detail you just provided us on that memory. And you would have been how old?
So I was year 8, so I was about 12, 13, which now is late for starting. I think, generally speaking, we have started sport earlier and earlier with children. I think a lot of sports started, and I think that's partially responsible for accelerated early drop-off. If we've got kids who've played a sport for 10 years by the time they're 16, I'm not surprised they do something else. Yeah. But I was probably considered a late starter by today's standards. But yeah, I can remember it so vividly because it was a pivotal moment in my life.
Yeah, it's literally just a switch. Someone says something, no matter how big or small it is, and then all of a sudden switches you on to do something completely different. That's the most amazing thing with me.
Oh, I still sing with a hairbrush though.
Yeah, I was going to ask, that was my following up question. Is music still a bit of a part of your day-to-day routine, or not really?
It is. And I don't know whether this is just because I've got older, but I love listening to absolute 80s, 90s and 2000s. And I've noticed that I associate certain songs with certain things. I love listening to music for its nostalgia value because of that association. Now, whether that's a normal thing that most people associate, I don't know, but it's very vivid with me. Yeah. I remember exactly where I was when I associate a song.
I find it really interesting, this conversation already, and this is why I really wanted to talk to people like yourself, Tony. But like, you've got real clear memories, and you're able to recall things to some really like infinite details. Is that something that happens with you quite a lot? Have you got the ability to recall lots of information, and do you have clear memories?
Yeah, yes, I do. So what happened was I was diagnosed in July of 23, so about 18 months ago. And it wasn't a huge amount of follow-up, but the follow-up I got was lovely. It was really good. And one of the bits of advice that I was given was a way of coming to terms with how things have happened is possibly to go over it and maybe even write a book. Now, not necessarily a book for publishing and reading, but write down things that happened so I can reflect on that and try and piece together maybe why did it happen in that manner. So when I get an idea like that, I often go with it to the nth degree. So I have done. So I now have on my laptop a full-on autobiography. Like it is like in detail. I've now just crossed I'm up to last year. So I'm up to the point where I've left the FA. The cricket chapters, I'll write them in a few years' time. So I've gone as far as I want to go now. 70,000 words.
Wow.
And I've done that without having to do any research or anything, just sat there looking out the window thinking, what happened then? And my wife's read little bits of it and she's like, how do you remember all this? And because there's incredible detail in it. I think lawyers would need to look over it if it ever got published. My intention is that when the boys are older, I think on Amazon you can send text and get a book made. So I'd like to, when I maybe reach retirement, just go, that's kind of your dad's story. There you go. So there'll only be one copy. But because there's some good old stories in there.
I can imagine there's some stories. I remember a couple of conversations a long time ago from what my memory would be. We won't delve into them, don't worry.
You can't be involved in sport and not have some absolutely bonkers stories, particularly like professional sport, where some of the people in them are well known, which is why lawyers would have to look up. It's 70,000 words. If a lawyer looked at it, it'd probably be a pamphlet.
I reckon there'd be a lot in that, actually. I think there'd be some really interesting conversations. I reckon your story would be more inspirational to people than you think, in terms of, even just now in the early part of our conversation, we're listening to you recall such detail on your memories about what inspired you to be involved in sport and the people involved, and then how the music suddenly relates to an imagery where you sat at the side of the rug. That is just, in my world, as an ADHD, I've got like the opposite side of that. So I can't remember half of the stuff that's ever gone on, and I struggle to remember where we're going next in many ways. Whereas your ability to pull that information out and remember it is really interesting. Does that, and has that played a part in helping you develop your career from going on from being a teacher to then being in professional sport?
Yes, and I would go as far to say as I don't think my career would have looked anything like it has done if I wasn't autistic. And obviously, I've only been able to say that over the last 18 months. But whether I do or I don't, I've often felt that I've been really impacted by imposter syndrome. Over the years, I've had the headsets on with coaching staff in Super League and appeared in the background on TV and stuff like that. I've been in changing rooms in first team games. Then I've worked with people like Paul Sculthorpe and Kevin Sinfield and been sat in performance meetings with Paul Anderson. And then I've gone to the FA and I've worked with Kay Cossington and Serena Wiegman. I've sat and had my lunch with Gareth Southgate. And when you have those experiences and you were the chubby kid who got picked last in PE, there's got to be that natural, how have I ended up doing this when there are people with far more ability and this, that, and the other? And my reflection over the last 18 months is there has to be some level of super strength that's given me opportunities, because you don't get anything because you're nice. You've got to be able to do something. I don't quite know what that is, and I can't put my finger on it, but I've been lucky too consistently for it to just be luck. There's elements of being in the right place at the right time, making the right connections. I'm a big believer in it's not what you know, it's who you know. But you've got to hold your own in certain environments, in conversations. And even in this job, Rob Andrew is, I think he's director of the professional game at the ECB. I didn't realise he worked in cricket, but I'm stood in a Christmas jumper having a beer with him just before Christmas. And it's like, how's that happened? That's somebody that I watched on TV. And when I first saw him, it's like, wow. And he just refers to me as Fretters now. And it's like, all that's bonkers. But there has to be a reason why I've got those opportunities. It's not a pretty face. It's not my own sporting ability. And that's where I've got this belief that the traits that I demonstrate as a result of being neurodiverse have definitely helped me. Some things have hindered me, but I think that the hindrances have either been more in my personal life, or if they've been in my professional life, they've been masked, which brings us on to kind of some of the more difficult sides of it, because while we talk about loads of positives about autism, it's a condition that brings a lot of challenge as well. You know,
what are some of the hard sides, like day-to-day life? What are some negatives that autism brings in your case?
I think in summary, some of the negatives have been that I'm exceptionally particular. Things have to be a certain way. The room that I'm in now, this is like my office space where I work. It's a converted garage. Nobody else can clean it. Like I clean it. Everything has to be where I put it, and everything has to be structured in a way. You know that TV show on Netflix, Atypical? So Sam in there, he has a whiteboard that basically is his structure for every day, and he plans his week in. And it's literally got when I'm going to Aldi, when I'm going to go for a run. He's got everything on there. I've got exactly the same. It's just over there. So that particular nature. Now, the thing is, life's not like that. Life doesn't work in that order. So when I've found it particularly hard is when things out of my control have happened. And also, it's really affected my personal relationships to the point that I've really struggled with personal relationships for decades. My wife, Christine, she's the first person I ever met who got it. She was the person who encouraged me to seek investigation and then diagnosis. And I think every person who is neurodiverse needs somebody who gets it. That doesn't mean to say they need an expert, but they need somebody who understands that there's a difference here. This is not a choice. These are not awkward and difficult ways to be. These are just who we are. And if you've got that significant person who gets it,
it's really interesting you say that, because I think you're 100% right. I think when you can find someone who understands you and in many ways has that acceptance, that understands that you are you and you've always been you, that there's just something more about you that just needs to be loved and cared about. I think it's really amazing. Like, it's similar way to you is like when I met Michelle 21 years ago, my wife Michelle, and she always said little things around how I am, and she was so understanding towards it. But then when we had my son, she was like, oh, he's just like you. And you're like, what does that mean? She's like, he's just like you. And as it came along, I found out my ADHD, and she's like, this is what I've been saying. You might need to go and get yourself checked and stuff. And that support and that comfort next to you just makes you feel like you can really express what it is you're trying to do. And I don't know about yourself with that, Tony, but you mentioned masking. Do you find like you still mask in different environments, and that and is there any environments where you feel you can be more comfortable? And then can you give us examples of what they might be?
Yeah, all the time. So if we go, everybody's kind of got two lives. They've got the personal and the professional life. So in my personal life, Christine noticed that we got on really well when we first started seeing each other. Although we did, because a year after we met, we bought a house and we're having twins. We must have got on really well very quickly. But Christine noticed that we never really had words or disagreements, but there was a pattern that emerged when we were going to something, a wedding or a birthday event or something like that. And she said to me, why are you always difficult when we go to something? She was like, do you not like my family? Do you not like my friends? So she noticed that, but she didn't have an answer at that point. But she noticed a trend of when we're going to a social occasion, you're difficult. I was a bit moody. I was awkward. And now in retrospect, it's easier when you know what the diagnosis is, you can go back and you can put the pieces back together. So now we know that was down to an anxiety of social situations. And actually, I was known for just disappearing like a puff of smoke when I was at university. So I'd go out for a bit, then I'd suddenly just disappear. I would side door everything. But also as an extreme, when I was at university, my first year, I never went out once because my dad said to me, I got in through clearing, and my dad said, what a brilliant opportunity you've had, don't waste it. So I promised him I wouldn't. So I didn't go out at all in my first year. Wow. And then I learned that I was probably missing out on something. So I made up for it in year 2 and onwards.
Yeah.
Just on that, Tony, sorry. Do you know when your dad said that, did you take it, knowing what we know now, did you take that as a literal and you're right, Dad, I don't want to do that, and it became a literal thing? Or was it just a case of you just didn't want to let people down?
Bit of both. I think having no brothers or sisters, being an only child, all focus is on you. You haven't got the benefit of your brother or your sister getting something wrong to take the heat off you. Your parents and your grandparents want the best for you, and if you muck up and make a big mistake, you feel like you've let them down. But yeah, I would take things really literally, and I still do. And part of my diagnosis is I can't tell from somebody's expression how they're feeling. So Christine's used to me going, is everything all right? Have we done anything wrong? And it's just because I don't know. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. And she will have ways now of telling me what her mood is. So she'll tell me before I get anxious and ask. But in terms of my professional life, yes, masking happens a lot. So let's say, for instance, I've spoken at some conferences where there's been 200 people in the room. And when I arrive, I often blame it on the fact that a train was late and I had to run or something, because I sweat a lot before something happens. I get very sweaty, I get very clammy, my hands are wet through. And you know that thing where it's like something starts at 10, so there's coffee from 9:30. So good timekeeping means you get there at 9:30 and you'll stop and have a coffee. And it's just all unstructured, loose chit-chat beforehand. I struggle like hell with that. What I want to do is turn up at 9:59 and start. And sometimes if I've got there too early, I've waited outside round the corner until I feel that I'll go in. So I find that really difficult. As soon as it starts, even though I'm speaking in front of 200 people, and this is where that obsession with what I want to do, as soon as I'm talking about what I want to talk about and I feel comfortable talking about it, I'm that cool, ice cold, no sweating, absolutely calm. Go to lunch, I'm in a bit of a panic again. I do that thing where I sit on a stool in the corner, like on my phone, looking like I've got to sort something out really urgent. And I'm finding out whose birthday it is on Facebook because I've got nothing urgent to deal with, but it's my way of shielding me from that awkward social situation. I hate social occasions per se. I play vets football now, and they have socials where they'll go out for a day or for a night. I don't go to them. They know I don't do social. But when I look back, as part of the assessment conversations, I realised I've never had a birthday party. I didn't realise that until I thought about it and looked back. But I never had one. Didn't want friends coming around. I used to go for a meal with my mum and dad, or we'd go off and do something, but I'd never have a party. I didn't have an 18th, didn't have a 21st, didn't want one. Wow. Not what I do. I like to do what we were going to do anyway. It's just my birthday, so I get a card, I get a present, but we're still doing what we're going to do.
Is that because of that one structure? The plan, the idea in like maybe mentally you've already planned out your day as well. I wake up, I'll get a card, I'll get my breakfast, I'll go to school.
For my birthday last year, and this is fine, you can keep this in because we've laughed about it since. We didn't laugh about it at the time. For my birthday last year, Christine booked a holiday for us to go away at Christmas. It was like a full-on meltdown. I got really sad, and it ruined my birthday because it was like, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this at Christmas, and I'm going to go to that game, and that's all kind of planned, and Mum and Dad will come over then. And it was like, that's just smashed out of the park, really. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to be going to an airport on Boxing Day morning. In a nutshell, we didn't go away, and we've swapped it, and we're going somewhere in July where I've been involved in it. And another one, so just here, there's like a weights bench. So it's like this proper bench with weights that are incorporated into it. Really nice technology in one. And Christine bought it for me for our anniversary 4 or 5 years ago. And when it arrived, I just looked at it and I didn't open it for 3 days because I didn't want it. because I'm like, where's it going to go? Because what I thought it was a rack of weights and then a bench that you adjust. I'm like, we've no room for that. When I opened it and saw what it was and saw that it would fit in and it would be like a coffee table, then I can use the space of it and it works out perfectly. Loved it. One of my favorite things I've ever had. But if I don't know something's coming, I can struggle with it.
Can we just go back to like university, asking from a university student myself? When it comes to, of course, your issues with social interaction, like you said, like first year you didn't do anything and then you went out a bit more and socialized second year. How was it actually affected by it? And because, of course, back then you weren't diagnosed. So was it always just the case you would come out and then leave shortly after? Or how did you feel, basically? How would it make you feel? Did you have to have a really big build up to any social interaction? And of course, like living it, I'm guessing it was like accommodation, maybe shared kitchen, shared whatever.
Yeah, but I'm laughing about that. When I was at university, I would go out on certain nights. I would go out most Wednesdays, some Fridays, depending on whether I was playing on the weekend. And I would go to the same places. Didn't like going to somewhere new. And I liked to know at least 3 days in advance where we were going. And when people go, oh, we're going to go here, so that's usually when I'd get off. I would plan in meticulous detail. So I would know, this is how much a drink's going to cost. This is how much money I've got. This is how much a tomato garlic bread's going to cost on the way home. So I've put that money there. I would plan it in meticulous detail. That detail wasn't shared. And I didn't realize I was doing that. But I look back now and I laugh. In my first year, I was in halls and we had a shared kitchen. And anybody who's ever been in halls knows what a shared kitchen is like. I remember there was a vial cupboard. And the vial cupboard was where people put stuff to see what happened to it if you just left it. So there was pieces of bacon in there that were 6 months old and all sorts. I just couldn't bear this. So my halls had a sink. And I then got my own fridge, got my own microwave, got my own kettle. And I would prepare food for me that I'd heat up in the microwave and stuff like that. So basically I disassociated myself altogether with that shared space. Just wasn't having a bar of it. Just couldn't do it. Then when we had a shared house, I was very particular about who I would share with. It had to be people who would maintain what I felt were acceptable kitchen standards. The kitchen was the most contentious room in the house. You could do what you want in your bedrooms, you within reason in the living rooms, but the kitchen had to be like strict rules.
That makes sense, to be fair.
But it makes for somebody good to live with because they're always going to be tidy. You know what it's going to be like. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. I want to bring you now into your current job. So I just want to move on a little bit. I think some of the stuff we've talked about is so interesting. And I'm curious to know then, how does it present more and more within the job, whether you're in right now with the ECB or like you've been in previously with the rugby league and the women's football? Like, how does your autism present? And I suppose the bits what I'd like to just probe you a little bit around is like, who within the environment knows and how do they know how to help you? And who is also around to, or how do you help yourself in them environments?
Yeah. So in terms of how it presents, there's two sides to the answer. There's how it presents when you're not diagnosed or you don't know, and how it presents post-diagnosis. So let me start with pre-diagnosis first. I am really firm on punctuality of meetings starting. That's a common norm, right? People have to be on time. And in sport, that's an expected norm. What is an awful trend that isn't an expected norm is finishing on time. So it all feels one way. You will have a meeting that's booked for 10 till 12 and 12:30 it's still not finished. And that used to really wind me up. That kind of side dooring, just disappearing in a puff of smoke, was a norm at meetings because I didn't want to stand around and chit chat. We finished the meeting, I've got somewhere to be, even if it's I'm going. When I was at the FA, we would control our hotel bookings. We did them ourselves on a portal. We didn't do that so much at the RFL. It wasn't as much travel, and also there was no money to pay for it. But at the FA, we used hotels a lot more. If I was at St George's Park for a few days, or even just overnight for one night, everybody would book at the hotel at St George's Park. But if we did that, then we had a kind of accidental meeting that took place. People would gather for dinner and they'd talk about work. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to have another meeting and socialize in my downtime after I've been masking all day. Now, bear in mind, I don't know that at this time. So what I did all the time, and I smile at things I was doing that were autism encouraged, but I just booked somewhere else. So everybody's staying at St George's Park, and I was at the Premier Inn in Uttoxeter. And I stayed at the Premier Inn in Uttoxeter that much that the people on reception knew my name. They knew I preferred room 312 and let me have a locker to keep my toiletries in because I stayed there loads. Now,
Customer service point.
yeah, they were brilliant. They were lovely. But you can envisage when everybody's staying in one location, where's Tony? He's up the road. End of a meeting. Where's Tony? He's gone. You could see that starts to create a bit of a challenge about my attitude and the way I'm behaving. And also bear in mind that if I believe something, I will nearly always say it.
Yeah.
That isn't that popular sometimes. Add to that, I'm not very good at reading people's facial expressions and noticing when they're annoyed and unhappy. I'd keep telling it. I won't swear because this is going on YouTube. I would annoy some people quite a lot sometimes. And I think wasn't 50-50, or at least I don't think it was, but that it was. I was certainly a bit Marmite in that you either loved me or you hated me.
I don't think anyone hates you, Tony.
I think there was definitely a category of people who were like, oh, here he goes again. Because I would say something that other people wouldn't. And I just thought that was fairly normal. So pre-diagnosis, that's a challenge. And I experienced that. I don't think I experienced that as much working in rugby league, either at the professional clubs or the governing body, because in that sport, it is inherently northern working class people. And a common trait of that aspect of society is saying what you think. And it would be that kind of northern bluntness that was a bit more normal, so it didn't stand out as much. When you're working in a national organisation with a different culture like football, it did stand out quite a lot. And some people would attribute it from, oh, he's northern, oh, he's from rugby league, he's not from football. And that was the rationale as to why that happened. What changed all that was post-diagnosis. So post-diagnosis, I then found out about things like reasonable adjustments, which I'd never heard before. I had my document that basically was the summation of the findings of my assessment. And I was encouraged, if I felt able, to talk to my colleagues about that. And it was a very emotional, enlightening experience. It was a small group, about 6 people that I worked with on a daily basis. But it was very, you could see them in the room going, I get it. Now I understand. And I'd say to people, I think the world of Tessa Payne and Sharon Brownlee and Rob Gear, people I worked with really closely, and they would go, yeah, that used to wind me up. Or I never understood, why did you just go to a different hotel? That's just bizarre. And sometimes I might take it personally, and they'd say, it's not personal, I just want to do my own thing. And as soon as I had diagnosis and there was rationale, it was so much more understood, and therefore I could be me in a much greater level of comfort. When I then went to the ECB, having had that experience at the RFL, one of the first things I said was, I've got this reasonable adjustment document. And they were great. They said, obviously, we want to have a meeting about, does it need to change? What needs to be in it? What can we do? And for reasons linked to the ICEC report, the Independent Commission into Equity in Cricket, that was very high profile in 2023 when that came out, basically saying there were lots of issues of discrimination within cricket and it wasn't a particularly welcoming environment, which I don't think is wholly true. I think it was aspects of the game. There's a big emphasis on being better. So with that in mind, they went beyond just wanting to meet my reasonable adjustments document and go, how are we going to learn from this? What can we do? So they do this thing called the ECB Live event. It's basically like a mini TV show for people who are working in cricket. So you've got probably about 50, 60 people in a live audience at Lords, but it's broadcast to all the staff in the counties. And they just did a 15-minute segment where they asked me to talk about my diagnosis, what it meant, and how it might manifest. I don't really, because I never watch anything back. Like,
Yeah.
I won't watch this back, mainly because I don't know what my voice sounds like. And it's for other people. It's not for me to watch back. So I never watched it back, but whatever was in it obviously resonated because the reaction to it was quite phenomenal. Literally blew me away. And the amount of people that want to be better at being inclusive for neurodiversity, wanting to learn more about it, and crucially, the amount of people who've gone, how did you go about getting assessment? Because they think they are as well. Because statistically, the ECB's worked out they've probably got 40 neurodiverse staff, but they know of me, which is fascinating.
Yeah, really fascinating. And again, like the whole reason why we wanted to have this podcast running is for exactly that story. And Tony, I think so far this has been such an inspirational conversation. I think there's so much learning, just even like from me and Tatjana's point of view. I think we're learning so much from you by just talking to you. And I really hope that's resonating with everybody who's listening to it.
So, Tony, can I just ask you also, after, of course, growing up undiagnosed, what was the moment where you were like, or what influenced the moment where you were like, okay, it's time to see what's happening really, or having that diagnosis to finally officiate, if you would like to say, what was the moment?
An evolution of attitude towards autism. So let me try and explain that. 13 years ago, when my eldest was 6, roughly about that time, he was diagnosed. And when I found out that news, I have to admit that there was almost like a period of mourning that I had lost the son I expected I had, and considered this to be tragic news that he was autistic. And I absolutely accept that was down to my own ignorance of what autism actually meant. And probably popular culture examples created a perception of what it was. I thought it was all Rain Man and speaking funny, and that kind of belief of that's what autism means. And then you suddenly realize this person's not any different to how I've known them. There are some behavioral traits that I recognize, but they've not suddenly changed. It's not like an injury or something like that. And then we noticed Oscar was a little bit different. And bearing in mind the previous experience of Matthew with autism, it raised that question in our head. And we started to believe that maybe he might be. In terms of myself, though, the big catalyst, which is probably not what you expect, was a documentary featuring Paddy McGuinness. So there was a documentary with Paddy McGuinness and his then wife, Christine, about their life and their 3 children, 2 of whom are autistic. Now, when you watch that documentary, at the end of the show, Christine is diagnosed because she goes through the assessment process. So whilst watching that, we learned about the AQ test, didn't know about that. We found out you could just get a free one online and give it a go. So the documentary finished and we did it that night. We downloaded it on our phones and did it. And it's out of a score of 50. And the hypothesis of it goes that the higher you score, the more likely you are to be autistic, and it's advised to go and seek assessment. So Christine scored 50. I scored 46. So she laughed and said, I knew it. She'd made a decision based on that there was a diagnosis there. And then I went to the GP. GP was good, but said it's going to be a long wait. The wait was about 2.5 years. But Christine said I had to ring the number to see where I was on the list.
Wow.
Every month. They got used to me ringing every month. They were lovely. Yep, you're still on the list. Once I got past the 2-year threshold, they referred it to a private company called Clinical Partners, who were very good. And in that assessment process, there were observations from Christine and from people around me that I would never have recognised in a million years. So one of them was Christine identified that for 47 consecutive days, I had the same thing for lunch. And on the 48th day, we had an argument because we didn't have it in. So we argued about who did the shopping. It was then that I noticed things like I'd never had a birthday party. My room, only I can clean it. Those traits that were consistent with it. There was one assessment where I had to get some random objects and describe what they were for. and all of the descriptions of the objects were actually their official purpose. It was never something else that you could do with it that was creative. It was, that's what it's for. So it was like a paperclip. What could you use that for? And I'm like, attaching two pieces of paper. Whereas some people say, but you can bend the metal and you can a butterfly or all that kind of stuff. It's for attaching two pieces of paper. So there was lots of things like that. And then only 6 weeks after the final part of assessment, I was booked in the phone call. It was actually on an industrial estate near where we lived. It was a really hot day. I needed somewhere quiet to be. The kids were at home. There was nowhere quiet here. So I was sat in my car with the windows open because it was so hot in an industrial estate waiting for the phone to ring at 5 o'clock. And it did. And then I spent the next 40 minutes crying, but crying relief, not sadness. Yeah. She's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, everything makes sense." And I remember saying, this chokes me a little bit. I remember saying, "I'm so glad," because I thought that if I wasn't, then did that mean I was just a bad person?
That's very beautiful, if anything. Plus, at the very beginning when you said that, when you found out with your first son, like the moment of mourning, like you called it, I think a lot of parents feel the same, but maybe don't want to face it. So it's very amazing that you've covered that as well. It's not just parents, it's people as well. Same goes when finding out that, you've been diagnosed with something. It can be, like you said, a sign of relief or a complete meltdown and just making you feel horrible and stuff like that. So that's very important, I think, how you explained it for a lot of people out there.
Contrast that with the official diagnosis that we got just before Christmas that Oscar was autistic. That was jubilant. There was no mourning. It was, this is great because we've always believed this. And now he's not going to go through that process of trying to piece things together. We've had this conversation already. He knows he's autistic. He doesn't really know what autism means, but he knows he is autistic. He has a lanyard with sunflowers on it where he wears a badge sometimes. I've got one too. I don't really need it because I've managed for 47 years without having one. But I wear one, and my lanyard for work is a sunflower lanyard because I try to create a trail for others to follow that goes, well, if you're diagnosed, it's all right. So I have my lanyard not because I need to be overt and say people need to give me some help. I do it because if I do it, it's all right for somebody else to do it. And it might be all right for their children to do it. And eventually we might create enough of a movement and enough of a snowball that it just is absolutely the norm, that some people are going to be different. So let's just accept that. Because one of the things I was asked was in the ECB Live event, what would be your advice to people on working with neurodiverse people? And I actually discovered something to myself in the answer. I said, I think it's really important that you get to know them and you find out what works for them and try and make those adjustments in the way that it'll work best for them. And then I went, wouldn't it be brilliant if we just did that anyway, whether they were neurodiverse or not?
Yeah,
so true.
And if everybody as though they might be neurodiverse, everything would be better.
The world might be a better place,
I don't know whether that's like a eureka moment or a great Einstein-like discovery. If you treat everybody as though they might be neurodiverse, I think we might just be onto something there.
Yeah, honestly, it's so amazing listening to you, Tony. Like the things you're saying is just really inspirational for many people, not just with people with neurodiversity, but like you say, as parents, as people involved in sport. It's been really good listening to you. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate that.
No worries.
We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to go into a couple of quick fire questions, and then we'll let you get on with the rest of your day, Tony. So,
cheers.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Beyond Perception podcast. It is now time to say a big thank you to our sponsors, the Brain Charity. They're a national charity based in Liverpool, founded to support all people with neurological conditions. They offer practical advice, emotional support, and a range of physical and social activities. How they achieve this is by organising a range of activities and events, for example, all the classes that they have in the Neuro Gym. They also work with physiotherapists to provide the best support and care for you. But don't worry, they also have digital ways to connect and help you. How you can help them is by directly donating through their website, where you can fundraise a game or a marathon maybe. For corporations, you can work with them on organising different events, for example team building. They can also help you enhance your inclusivity policies, making your workplace more inclusive, and also you can refer any of your staff members with neurological needs to them for any of their facilities. To find out more how you can help the Brain Charity and how the Brain Charity can help you, visit them on their website, www.thebraincharity.org.uk. Support, raise awareness, and also raise understanding for all neurological conditions, and empower individuals and families to manage their condition and also realise their full potential. Massive thank you again to the Brain Charity for partnering up with us on this podcast and also letting us share this important message. Now let's carry on with the episode.
Welcome back, everybody. As you can see, we're still joined with Tatjana, and Tony is still spending time with us. So, Tony, it's been an absolute privilege again to have you on, and the conversation has been really good. We've got a couple of quick fire questions for you. So the first question is, what is your most memorable sporting moment?
My most memorable sporting moment. Probably the most memorable one is the one I spoke to you first, which was that first experience of playing in a game. But in the interests of creating a more interesting answer, I've got to say scoring at Wembley in a Blackpool shirt, because there was a staff game when I was at the FA, and it was December last year, and I played in defence. Our defence was very tired, and one of them went, "I'm sick of running. Can you go up front for a bit?" I had no idea what I was doing, but I scored. So I worked out I was the 14th player to score in a Blackpool shirt at Wembley, and the first to do it under floodlights.
Wow.
And also the first to do it with no crowd, but let's not go on to that.
That is a great answer, and if that's never an autistic answer as well, with the statistics and the data, that's superb as an answer. The second question would be, what is, I don't know you've mentioned one already, but what would be the biggest learning moment you've had in your life so far?
The biggest learning moment I've had, it's like a cumulative one, because it's something that repeats. If you give your best and you are authentic, and by giving your best, it means you've done your homework, you've prepared for what you're going to do, and you do it with real honesty, that will get you somewhere where you might not have thought you were going to get. Not always, but that is a reoccurring event that has happened lots of times, whereby I've been going to an event or been going to a conference or a meeting or whatever, and I've gone through that process. I've done it with as much integrity and authenticity as I possibly can, and I've given it my best by doing my homework, doing my prep, and something good comes from that, and then something else happens, and it's that moment but repeated many times.
Really good. And then the last one for you would be, what is one of your most amusing or fondest memories, one what just you look back at and it just makes you smile? What have you got for us with that?
In terms of sport or just generally?
I'll let you go with whichever way you want to take that, Tony.
Like I say, in sport, there's a million funny things. Oh, do you know what? I'll go with the obvious answer that'll be good for the people watching. Yes, many years ago, I was on Blind Date. That is something that has created masses of amusement for lots of people over the years, many times. Usually when I go to a new organisation, give it about 3-4 months and somebody discovers it online. You can't see the video that was taken off when I was a teacher, because every time I went into an IT suite, the kids went straight to it. It does exist digitally and on a DVD in my drawer, but it did lead to me being on the front page of the Daily Star.
Wow.
There you go.
And just for our younger viewers, Blind Date was a game show, wasn't it?
And to the younger audience, I have described it as the Love Island of its day. It was different to Love Island, but I'm quite happy with that. It was the Love Island of its day, and yeah, I'm happy with that as a description.
We'll leave that one at that. From me, what do you hope this podcast, or how do you hope this podcast helps other people listening?
Look, we know the estimates are very conservative, and we know that because of the wait, I think there's 270,000 people waiting to be diagnosed. We know that there's more boys that are diagnosed than girls, and that's not because there's any evidence of more prevalence of autism in girls. It's just, if you think about social media influences, desire to fit in, the way girls have to meet an expectation of a societal version of themselves. Look, we have got hundreds of thousands of people who are undiagnosed. We have lots of people who are diagnosed who are struggling with it. And everybody has a part to play in that. Whether you are neurodiverse yourself, or whether you love somebody who is, or whether you're just an ally to neurodiverse people, it's just an acceptance of difference. And we can all play a part in that. Indeed, we've got to play a part in that. We live in a society that's probably as intolerant as it's ever been. I'm not going to say it's more intolerant, but it's not good. You spend 5 minutes looking on social media and you'll find somebody's made a generalization or they've said something abhorrent. It's all around us. If we can make life easier for neurodiverse people and people who love them and have people in their family, and it just be okay and normal to be different, then that's the message. We've all got a part to play in that. You don't need a diagnosis to want to do this. You just need to care about people. Because as I said before, the answer to this actually applies to everybody, whether you're neurodiverse or not. Get to know people, understand their needs, what works for them. And if we all do that, we'll all be a lot happier.
I think that really hit the spot. I think a lot of people would highly agree and understand that more than you expect. Last question, how does diversity define sport, in your opinion?
Define sport. I think it's very similar to education, right? Let me explain what I mean by this. Our education system is ultimately derived from a military origin. So that's everybody dressing the same, everybody standing in lines, going in order, learning the same things, going through this structural, systemic approach to creating what people are like. And sport's got very similar origins. It has strong links to independent schools, particularly in some sports. In other sports, it's linked to northern factories. If you think of football and rugby league, cricket and rugby union are linked to independent schools. These are all regulated systems whereby everybody does what they're told and in the same way. And I think there's a legacy that comes from that sport's just trying to unravel now. And sport is like every other part of society, that people are different. So if you join a club, you've probably got to wear their kit. You've probably got to go through their system. Historically, you've probably got to go through some initiation stuff in some sports, and all that's changing. And what sport's got to learn is that everybody's going to be different. Everybody wants something different out of this. And we can accommodate that by doing the same principles that we're trying to do society-wide. Sport's got a long way to go in this. But to bring that to life, here's an example, right? My twins were doing all-stars cricket last summer, right? And in groups of about 12, it was lively. Bearing in mind, it's Friday evening. Parents are over there having a drink. They've fired the kids over there to come and play cricket. It's organised chaos. It's like herding cats. They're all aged between 5 and 7. It's May. And it's noisy. So what we did was we created a nurture group. And the nurture group was called the Purple Group. And it was for no other reason other than that I bought a lot of wristbands from Amazon. And it was like, if you're in the red group, you're there. Green group, you're there. Yellow group. And I had some purple wristbands left over. And the purple wristbands were a nurture group. And that was not for neurodiverse kids per se. It was for kids who were a little bit quieter, a little bit more timid, who just wanted a little bit of a calmer environment for them to flourish. It was one of the best things I've done in 35 years in sport. To just see those kids who were getting upset, crying, not wanting to do it, preferring to sit on their mum's knee, just seeing them loving their cricket. It was a group of 6, 7 of them. That's it. And all I used was a bit of creativity and some wristbands that I weren't using. You don't need to spend millions on this. You just need to think differently. And that's what sport's got to do holistically. And that goes right up to the very top level. Do we all have to wear the same tracksuit pants? Because somebody might have a sensitivity to the material and prefer to wear shorts. Can we be flexible on that? Do we have to have a problem with the fact that somebody wants to sit at the front of the bus and listen to their earphones rather than sing songs? Do we need to have that uniform approach that has that origin in a northern factory? or in a military base somewhere in the south or an independent school? Can we be more creative and more accepting of just difference? Because that will help with different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different kind of economic classes. It becomes more encompassing. Let people do what makes them most comfortable, and then they might fly a bit higher.
That's brilliant. Honestly, really brilliant, Tony. Just before we go, Tony, again, thank you. And if anybody wants to reach out or learn a little bit more about you, obviously not your dating profile, as we'll confirm.
All
Happily married. How can they find you? How can they reach out to you?
They'll find me on X and they'll find me on LinkedIn. Drop me a message on there. Don't have messages open on X, but they can tag me into a post and I'll respond. I never understand, why are people not abusive on LinkedIn, but they are on Twitter? I get that. But, you don't want the abuse, full stop. But if anybody wants to get in touch with me, they'll get in touch with me very easily that way.
That's great. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for your time. Tatjana, thank you very much for your time as well. It's great to have you on board. What can I say? That's been an outstanding an hour or so. Learned so much.
Thank you for having me on. And thank you to anybody who's watching this. I am ending this in a way that I'm used to going, why did they ask me? Why were I on it? Because I get really positive responses to stuff like this, and I still don't really get why, but it's very graciously received.
No, we're really grateful to have you on. Thank you. See you all soon. Take care, everybody.
Yes, bye-bye.